Hi everyone! So it's Sunday and that can only mean one thing. It's time to talk about the book I've been reading this week, which is a reread for me. It's one that I haven't read for probably about 3 or 4 years or something. And it was Hard Times by Charles Dickens. This is a novel which I have to say, I think Hard Times is one of his stories which people don't really know much about. It's because I think it's that thing that when you have books that like Great Expectations and stuff like that, there are some stories which kind of get pushed to the side, as it were, of his books. And Little Dorrit, which I absolutely love, is another one of them. But yeah, people don't know much about. And Hard Times, especially having reread it, it's got such a depth to it that I'm, I just absolutely love, and I think it's something that people should really read. It's a very, very interesting story, and it breaks his convention of the good guys win and the bad guys lose. So, just to get you up to speed with the story of this, it's set in a fictional place called Coketown, which is all industrialised, kind of like London. So there's lots of factories and causing lots of smoke and everything, and there's actually a comment about how black it is, when one character turns up in the middle of the story. I'll tell you who it is in a minute. He comments to another character, "My God, it's so black here. It's just absolutely ridiculous. How can you walk about?" And she goes, "Oh well, actually, usually it's blacker. It's just you're visiting us on a good day." So it's a very it's a very atmospheric story. You constantly feel that you're engulfed. It's claustrophobic, even though because you can't see, you can't take aboard what's around you. It's very harsh story. And in Coketown lives the Gradgrinds. So there's Mr. Gradgrind, Mr. Thomas Gradgrind, should I say, his wife, Mrs. Gradgrind, and their two children, Louisa and Tom. And it starts off when Louisa and Tom are about 9 and 10 years old. Louisa is the elder, only by about a year or something. They don't. It doesn't actually indicate exactly which is the older, from what I can recall, because obviously it's referred to right at the beginning of the book, and I've only just finished rereading it right now. So but they're very, very close in age. And Mr. Gradgrind is an MP and a teacher, and he's always brought his children up the same way that he was brought up, and that was to believe that scientific fact is all that you need in life. You don't think about emotions or anything like that, things that can cloud your judgment. Scientific fact will tell you what's right, what's wrong, what you need to know in life. And that is the way he's raised his children. So his children have been raised at home, homeschooled by him. And so they've been very much shut out from the world. They don't see other children. They only see their parents at home. And even then, it's, you keep quiet, you keep in the corner, you go to your classroom. They're very quite uncomfortable, quite harsh childhood to think about, but it's the way that they were brought up, the way that they were. And in comes a girl into their life called Cecilia Jupe, who is a girl from the circus. Her father works for the circus. He looks after the animals and such, and he has abandoned her. Well, she comes to the school, a new student. She gets accepted to the school, which she stands out for not understanding anything that they're talking about. She expresses herself about flowers and animals. She's a very happy girl because she's been brought up to that emotions and love and everything are key to life, and education is second. Being in circus, she's not been, really read much. She's knows very little of numbers and writing, so she's the complete opposite to Louisa and Tom. And she turns up at the school, and of course Mr. Gradgrind, he's not happy with her being there, so he goes to the circus to meet her father, only to find that her father has abandoned her. So he takes Cecilia home and looks after her at home, and has become the new pupil of his house. And because she's so different from Louisa and Tom, he gets very frustrated very easily because she can't understand what he wants, or she like there's this whole thing when he asks about if this room had X number of people in it and only 25 of them were died of starvation, is it a prosperous town? And she said, well, that doesn't matter, because the feelings of the people and that who died, their families extended, is really quite important. So that has to be taken into account, not just a number. And it really winds Mr. Gradgrind up, and she becomes companion to Mrs. Gradgrind, who is very ill. She's been ill for many years, and Sissy is the light in the house that suddenly appears. In this very dark realm, there's light that suddenly enters. And as the story goes on, it jumps to 10 years later when the children are grown up, and then what they go on to do, and how the effects of their backgrounds have affected them. Sorry, something's just come up on my screen. I just have to get rid of it. Just a sec. There we go. Sorry about that. It completely covered nearly the entire page of my screen then, so I couldn't see what on earth was going on. Okay, so now we're back. So yeah, you have this very strange dynamic, and there's also a character, reading it as an adult now, well, even a few years ago, and especially the more times I read it, the sicker he becomes, is a character called Mr. Bounderby. He is Mr. Gradgrind's really good friend. He runs basically Coketown. He owns so many, factories and that, and he is like the richest guy in Coketown, and he has always said how he was raised by an abusive mother who abandoned him, and he's had to work his way up. He didn't know any fine things in life. He's constantly talking about it, even when it's not appropriate. He just keeps on going on about it, his life story, as if you can imagine somebody's going to pop out the corner and write it all down and publish it into a book or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, he keeps talking about this, and he has had an obsession with Louisa since she was about, we don't know exactly how long, when did it start, but when the book begins, she's about 10 years old, and he's absolutely obsessed with this girl. And there's at the beginning, Mr. Gradgrind's found them at a circus. He's really upset that they're there. He's really angry that they would want to explore such a world because it's not about scientific fact. And he tells them off in front of Mr. Bounderby, and they go to their classroom, and Mr. Bounderby kind of comes in. He says, "Oh, I've squared it with your father," all this lot. And then he turns to Louisa while Tom is there and watching this whole scene, and it's so uncomfortable. And he says, "Well, surely that deserves a little kiss, don't you think, my pet?" And he's talking to Louisa. He always calls her my pet. And she stands there and let him kiss her on the cheek. And as soon as he leaves, she's rubbing her face raw, absolutely raw. And Tom makes a comment about, "Oh, you're going to rub a hole in your face." And she says, and it's so, oh God, it's so hard to think a 10-year-old thinking of having this happen and everything. And she says, "You can cut it out with your penknife if you want, Tom. I wouldn't cry." And that just tells you how she sees the world and how she hates Mr. Bounderby. But when she grows up, she is offered marriage to Mr. Bounderby, and she has to make this decision, and she looks at it as she always has, because of the way she's brought up, this scientific fact and what it means and all this lot. The only light in Louisa's life, because she hates Sissy with a passion, is Tom, her brother. They just so understand each other because of the way they were brought up and everything, and she will do anything for Tom, even if it means her going through the worst possible things imaginable. She will do it for him. It's just awful, the things that she goes through in this book for him. And when later on a man called Mr. Harthouse comes into the picture, he comes as to work for Mr. Bounderby in his factory. Well, not as a factory worker, that in the office, as it were, with the bank and everything that he owns as well. And he's quite a well-to-do man, and Louisa meets him, and for the first time somebody understands her, somebody wants to help her, someone who is well, he is about 10, 15 years older than her, but still of around her age, not Mr. Bounderby, who is in his 50s, 35 or something years older than her, who she has to put up with every single day. This dashing man comes into her life, and how, as a woman who has been raised to not look at, not acknowledge her emotions, suddenly has all her emotions flying towards her. How does she cope with that? It's really startling read, and how these characters deal with these situations. I also love a character who becomes quite prominent throughout the course of the book, but he is a secondary character, and he is called Stephen Blackpool, who is a poor man. He's working in the factories, one of Mr. Bounderby's factories. He is married to a woman. He's been married for about 20 years, and she's an alcoholic. She's been away for many, many years. He's paid her to keep away, and now she's come back. She's rather ill, but she's come back, and he has to deal with her. But he's fallen in love with a woman called Rachel, who all three, him, Rachel, and his wife, all knew each other from childhood. And as he says, he begs for help to get rid of his wife, but there's a law to convict him if he abandons his wife entirely. There's a law to convict him if he has a relationship with Rachel while he's still married. There's a law to convict him if he were to marry Rachel while still married. But the only law that can help him get out of marriage, which is divorce, he can't afford because he's poor, so he's told to put up and shut up. And it's so tragic, and the speeches that he gives, especially the one to Mr. Bounderby, where he says, look at us, we are the people who run this mill, who pour our blood into the earth, into these machines to keep you going, yet you're always right and we're always wrong, yet we are the masses and you're the few. It's basically a punch in the stomach to people who run these kind of factories. And I thought really quite daring at the time that Charles Dickens wrote this absolutely fantastic story. And when I said about how it breaks with convention at the end in regards to the good guys win, the bad guys lose is his convention, it kind of gets flipped on its head a bit, because in this one everybody gets punished in their own way apart from Sissy. She is the one who lives on to have happiness and joy throughout her life, just as she's been this shining light in the darkness of this story. But what is great, and it's so clever of Charles Dickens to do, is at the final chapter he talks about every single character and says what's happened to them, or what will happen to them in the future. And it's almost like a dream, because it's like it's swooping from one person to the other on this one night at this one particular minute, what is happening to them. As if you see Mr. Gradgrind, and then it suddenly swoops to see Mr. Bounderby, and then Louisa, and then Tom, and then Sissy. It's like you're going through straight. And then the very, very end, he says directly to the reader, I'll leave it up to you to decide if this will come to pass or not. The future can always change. I'll leave it in your hands. And then it just ends. And that is just amazing. Because how the story is about how things from the childhood of the way you're brought up, how it can lead on to your adulthood, and then further into your adulthood. But if you're telling the reader, because of what they have learned throughout this story, this is a possibility where they might go, but you might be able to decide the future for yourself of where these characters go, is extraordinary. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's a beautiful way to end this story. Even though the story is very dark, it's very sinister, as I said, it's very claustrophobic, it is brilliant. I absolutely love it. I think it's fabulous. Definitely reread Hard Times by Charles Dickens again. It's a hard yet wonderful story, an absolute joy and pleasure to read, and I love it. And as I said with my announcement video, it's got the way that Charles Dickens came up with names was just it's unlike any other writer I've come across since, except possibly J.K. Rowling, where he comes up with these absolutely amazing names. And my favourite name comes from Hard Times. It's in the very, very beginning. It is the headmaster of the school that Mr. Gradgrind works at, and he is called Mr. McChokenchild. It just tells you everything about his character just through his name. He's only seen like in the corner of the room. He doesn't act. He doesn't say lines or anything. He doesn't have words or anything. He's just a man with a name, and that name tells you everything about him that you need to know, and it is amazing. Absolutely. I don't know how he did it, Charles Dickens. I really don't. Now, the BBC did a drama of this back in, I think it was the early 90s. 1994, and it was one of the first period dramas I actually can recall watching, and I saw it because my sister was given a tape copy when obviously tapes existed, it was either birthday or Christmas present. I'm thinking more birthday, from our aunt and uncle. And I watched that, and I loved it. I thought it was great. And since then, it's always lived in my heart as being a period drama that I just absolutely love. And I think it's what then led me on to other period dramas. And I absolutely love them. I love all period dramas. I think they're amazing. And that is, the BBC Hard Times, with Bob Peck, Bill Patterson, and Richard E. Grant, just here. And the adult Louisa, as you can see right there, you might recognise that face if you're a Poldark fan. She's currently in Poldark. She plays Prudy. She's absolutely fantastic. Now this is, I had to have this imported from Germany. It's the only way you can get hold of this DVD. It's just not available at all in the UK. If you do get it, just FYI, on the opening menu it's just scene selection and play, but it does have subtitles. But I'm because of a display mode, as it were, on my Blu-ray player, I'm able to get rid of the subtitles. So if you do get this, you can get rid of the subtitles, but you have to wait until it starts playing in order to do so, because there's no menu option allowing you to do it. But anyway, back to this drama. It's absolutely fantastic. It's an hour and 45 minutes long. So it's quite short, but then this book, even though the book's like that, actually it's only 280 pages. The rest of this is appendix and telling you about Charles Dickens' life and everything. Look, that's the introduction there. It's got big chunks of it and everything that's to do with Charles Dickens and the appendices and that. So it's not all of this book, even though it's only an hour and 45 minutes. It does stay really quite faithful to the book. There are some little changes, but only minor. I wouldn't, I don't kick up a fuss about. There are literally like pages of dialogue straight from the book in these scenes. It's really well acted. The atmosphere of it is fantastic, because what they've done is that they've used a lot of black cinematography, lots of candles in dark rooms, the candle being taken away, so the casting of shadows and everything. Mr. Bounderby's house is fantastic because it is absolutely full of vibrant red, and of course red is a colour of passion and emotion, and kind of all this lot. But that passion, where it stems from the different characters, that passion is felt in different ways towards different things, and all these massive scenes happen in his house, really. Mr. Gradgrind's house is rather plain because he's scientific fact. He doesn't care about luxury, whereas Mr. Bounderby, because he constantly goes on about his upbringing, that he believes lavishness, everything is over the top and bold and daring. So you have that, and then you have light being played, as I said before, but more sun shining through windows and such at certain key moments and that. So the key colours in this drama, the cinematography, which is just perfect, it goes with this story, are black, red and white. And the moods, how it links with the moods of the characters and what they do. So overall, cinematography wise, I absolutely love this. Acting wise, because I've loved it since, you know, early to mid 90s, should I say. I absolutely love it. Especially Bob Peck and Bill Patterson are fantastic. Alan Bates as well. Sorry, Alan Bates plays Mr. Bounderby. Bob Peck is Mr. Gradgrind. Bill Patterson is Stephen Blackpool. And Richard Lee Grant right here is Mr. Harthouse. They're all absolutely fantastic, great cast, great, really well directed. You could argue when you look at it now that it's very much of its time, being in the early to mid 90s piece. And if you think about it, it was kind of Pride and Prejudice when that came along. That's when period drama went boom, for especially for the BBC, and this was the year before that happened. So it has got those various, you know, really wonderful elements to it, but it's not a piece entirely like Pride and Prejudice. But as I said, it's only an hour and 45 minutes, so it's not a long piece, but I absolutely love it. I enjoy it every time I watch it. I've just finished watching it now before making this video. I enjoyed it every single minute, even though I knew what was coming up. I knew what the next line was going to be because I've watched it so many times. I still love it. And yes, especially adult Louisa is played absolutely wonderfully. I can't recall what her name is, and it's just fallen completely out of my head. So sorry, I'll put it in the description. I feel really bad now. She's in Poldark, and I absolutely love Poldark, and her name has fallen out of my head. I'll put it in the description. So, but I'm very sorry for forgetting your name. But yeah, and it also stars, so Alan Bates, Bob Peck, Bill Patterson, Richard E. Grant, Harriet Walter, and Peter Barnes. And it was adapted by Peter Barnes and produced by Richard Longbridge. Harriet Walter is another actress in it, and she's brilliant. So yeah, strongly recommend the BBC adaptation of Hard Times from 1994. As I said, can only get it as a German import, but really worth the money, I think. All right, I'm going to stop there. And so that was what I thought of Hard Times. Have you read Hard Times? I'd love to know what you think of it. You can leave me comments in the comments box below, or if you want to show what you thought another way, you can give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down, entirely up to you. I'll leave it up to you. And yeah, I will be back soon with the announcement of what the next book is I'm going to be reading for next week. All right then, guys. Bye.